Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions today during the presentations, please type them into the Q&A icon on your Zoom toolbar, and we'll get to them at the end of each presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 14th edition of Crop Talk. And for today, we're going to start with a bit of a seeding update, and that's kind of what's happened over the last week throughout the province, where we're sitting, and just to look at some of the things that were going on. And then we're going to talk a little bit about managing dry conditions, and we're kind of getting a bit of a chuckle before we got going here, but picked the right topic, because maybe by talking about it, we'll get some rain here. And the way the forecast is talking, we should be getting some, but it definitely has cooled off from the heat we've been getting, and maybe that'll bring some rain on. But right now, it's no rain in some areas, but I heard there's some rain in the right around the Brandon area right now. So I think it's going to start. And then from there, we'll go to the crop scouting panel, and we're going to talk a bit about some of the questions that have come in, and maybe a couple of questions. There was lots of questions last week, and we missed a couple, so we're going to try to get some of those answers as well. So with that, we'll get going. So some highlights from the crop report. Seeding progress this past week was fast across the province. Conditions are mostly good for most areas. Producers are still managing to seed into moisture, but I guess the biggest issue there is with the heat and the winds. A lot of the soil is drying pretty much right where you open it up to put the seed in the ground. So a lot of the seed is going in the ground and sitting in in a dry layer. Moisture will come up as it's packed as it goes by, but it's still it's dry in a lot of areas. And when you look at our precipitation accumulation in most areas, we're less than 50% of normal, and I think and even in some areas it could be even a lot worse. So I think any rains that we have been getting have been the spotty type showers that maybe only hit a small area, but right now we're hoping for more rain over the next couple of days here. So looking at the cereal crops, our winter wheat and fall rye crops are advancing fairly well. They're definitely taking advantage of the winter moisture, and a lot of the crop is anywhere from that 3 to 5 leaf stage and tillering. A lot of producers have completed the weed control already, and the crop looks to be well on its way. So I think in most cases, from talking to producers, we're sitting in a good spot there with our fall seeded crops. Spring wheat across the province, really getting close to being complete, with most producers reporting finishing up their cereals, by beginning or end of the weekend here. A lot of the wheat had been finished off, and producers were switching into barley and oats, and then some of the pulse crops as well. Corn planting, again, it's been going in the last little while, and has gotten up to be pretty much where corn usually is planting at this time of year. Some of the earliest planted stuff is looking like it might start to emerge next week here, so that's a good sign as well. But let's hope it waits till after the weekend, as some of the weather that they're calling for might make it a little cool for some early emerging crops. One of the fields I was in this past week was in the ground for 6 days, and you could see that it was starting to poke through already. And so that's pretty fast, mainly because the soil is so warm that the crop basically gets put in the ground and starts to take on moisture and start growing fairly quickly. So we're definitely seeing crop come up fast. A lot of the fields, early seeded fields, you could definitely see rows in them already. And if we do get some rain here, I think it's only going to speed up the process as long as it doesn't get too cold, and it'll maybe just sit for a few days, but it's probably going to heat up again after that. Oil seeds. Canola planting has started in most of the province. Several producers are watching the weather right now. They're kind of, it's too dry. I'm going to wait for some rain, holding off there, watching the forecast, seeing that there's some cool conditions, cool temperatures being forecasted for next week. So they may be holding off there, wanted to be put in the ground and up as fast as they can. It's got some comments from some producers where they were actually, instead of seeding canola, were going into their soybeans and and other crops, and then we're going to come back to canola. So right now, I think canola, and for a lot of producers, is kind of on that holding pattern. Sunflowers, about halfway done throughout most of the area, and flax in some areas has been put in the ground already. Central and Interlake area is reporting about half the flax in the ground already. So again, you can see where producers are maybe holding off on the canola and trying to get some of these other crops in. And regarding the pulses, when you look at where we sit there, field peas are I would say in most areas complete. The Northwest is sitting around 65% complete, but some of the early seeded peas are up and through the ground already. So they've been in the ground in some areas for a couple of weeks already. So they're definitely coming through. Um, and what's not coming through yet is sprouting, and will probably be up fairly shortly here. Soybeans, about 25% complete across the province, and I think those numbers will probably be going up by next report because, as I mentioned already, producers have been putting in soybeans and holding off a bit on their canola. Weeds, and I mentioned this last week, that weeds are growing rapidly, and you could see the picture I took yesterday of dandelions. They're definitely on the go, and getting to that stage where we're going to need to do some control before they get too much bigger and more advanced, because they're just going to be harder and harder to kill. So remember to keep an eye on the winter annuals, as they are definitely taking off, and they're going to be an issue as we go a little bit further here. So when you look at where we sit now, we're about 33% complete across the province. And a significant jump from last week, where we were only at 8%. Our 5-year average is 25%, and last year at this time we were at 30%. So we're definitely ahead of schedule from where we were last year, and for our 5-year average. One thing to remember is it got wet and cool in that middle part of May last year, which is kind of what we're looking at for the next few days here. And that caused some issues when we were planting, especially some of the canola crop suffered a bit from that. So just a caution, I guess. See how much rain we do get, if we do get rain here, and hopefully it doesn't stay too cool for too long, because we don't want the same situation as last year, where we had some emergence problems with canola because of the wet cool conditions. So definitely keep an eye on that as we go forward and the weather changes here. So where are we sitting on our seeding date and for maximum yields? Really only a couple of the crops that are past the 100% yield response are getting close to that date where we start to lose yield. And so the first one is peas, and so we're like I mentioned, most guys have that in already, so that's good. The other two that are close is our corn and our spring wheat. So we, and again, both of those are our wheat is almost complete, or pretty much complete, and corn is going in. So I think we're still good on the chart for maximizing our yields as we go forward here. little bit on the forecast, and when you look at what they're predicting here for the next little while, I guess the good part is the rain. The scary part is the cool conditions, but then seems to break up after Sunday, Monday. There, it seems like it might warm up again, but we're gonna have a couple nights there where it's gonna get fairly cool. So I don't think it's going to be cool enough to affect any of the crop that has emerged yet, because most of those crops are fairly good and tolerant to like the light frosts. And I don't know if I haven't heard, but Dennis is going to be on a little bit later here talking a bit about managing soybeans, and he can maybe see if there's any soybeans breaking through the ground yet, but we'll go from there. And when you look at the prediction for frost, you look at our average date for the last spring frost. We're pretty much right in that area right now. You look at the light brown color, that's May 16th to May 19th. So, and even the red is May 13th to May 16th. So we're pretty much bang on for getting a frost this weekend, for kind of our last days for getting a frost. So hopefully after this weekend, we'll be good for a while. So with that bit of an update, didn't want to take a whole bunch of time away from Dennis and Sonia, because we're going to start with Dennis talking a bit about managing soybeans under dry conditions, and then we're going to go to Sonia, and Sonia is going to talk about some of our oilseed crops and manage them under dry conditions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis, and Dennis is going to start right now.
Okay, thanks, Lionel. I'm just going to share my screen here, and we'll get going here. And we're just going to go full screen here. Yep, there we go. Alrighty. Okay. So last weekend, I thought about what I would talk about this week on Crop Talk, and with all the soil that was moving around down in my neck of the woods, I thought rolling soybeans in dry conditions might be a good topic to talk about. Typically with soybeans, a lot of growers like to roll right after seeding. On most years, that works out okay. If you have some stone issues you have to deal with, here's a photograph here. You can see the area that was rolled here in the bottom left corner to the area that wasn't rolled. Growers do it for various reasons, mostly for stones, but also to make harvesting a little easier. The challenge that you run into, though, is on years like this, when we have very dry soil conditions and we see some soil moving around. These are the years that you want to maybe put that roller on hold for the time being. Rolling on years when you have all this soil moving around is just going to make matters worse. Was chatting with one fellow yesterday, and we were, talking about the soil moving around, and he says, "Yeah, I made a mistake. I ended up rolling my soybeans, after seeding, and it was so dry. And now that's a field that's where the soil has moved the most." So what happens, on a year like this, if you are concerned about that soil moving around? Can you roll after seeding? Well, most definitely you can. There's some things to keep in mind, and we'll talk about that. Just as an FYI, this is not from this year. This is from 2017. The next few slides here, but it'll show you some of the things that to keep in mind when you're looking at rolling soybeans after emergence. First thing you need to remember is don't roll at the hook stage when those beans are just pushing through. Right now, the beans are still in the soil. So if you're in an area where you have to roll now and the soil is reasonably good moisture, then if they're in the soil, they're fine. But if you're just starting to poke through the soil, like you see here, that's probably the worst time to roll, because you're going to snap those plants, and that will definitely decrease your plant stand. Ideally, you want to be rolling at that first trifoliate, and that first trifoliate is that grouping of first three leaves. Now, I say first trifoliate mainly because if the beans are at the first trifoliate stage, they're definitely all past the hook stage. You can roll if you're at the full unifoliate stage, where you just have these two big leaves that you see here, and just ensure that those plants are all emerged and there's no beans still just poking through. There's a couple short little videos I'll just play here. This is again from 2017 where the farmer is rolling. And we're just going to start that video here. And with that, you can see here he's moving along. It's a fairly warm day. It's about not it wasn't sunny when we rolled it, but the air temperature was about 27 degrees that day. And you can see here rolling across those beans, and they're at that first trifoliate stage. And we'll move on to the next one here in a second. And another one here. This is just more of a close-up view of the rolling. You can see a very windy day that particular day. And you can see what happens after the pass. You know, on a really good warm day, you don't really see much damage to those plants. But it is important to check to make sure that you're just bending those plants over. If you're just bending the plants over, they will come back up. If, however, if they're broken like this is where you're going to have some concerns. Now, you will get some regrowth here from the axillary buds right in here, but really, if you have too many of those plants broken and you're reducing your plant stand, that is a real concern. So again, you want to be rolling on a really warm day, above 25 degrees. You want to be rolling, don't roll before lunch. Those plants need to be pliable. So some days you're maybe 25, 26 degrees at 11 o'clock in the morning. Give it till the afternoon because it does take a while for those plants to kind of, be very pliable and they need to be bending so they don't cause any damage. So I usually say don't go out and roll until after lunch on a really 25-degree day. Plants should be at least the first trifoliate, or at the very least the unifoliate stage. Um, if you're rolling at the hook stage, that's too early and damage will occur. But make a pass when you go out there on a warm day. Make a pass, see what, and check for damage. If you see those broken plants, count the number of broken plants, and do a comparison to what your plant stand is. If with the healthy plants, you're at between that 140 and 160,000 plants per acre, that's the magic range. That's what you want to be at. So in some instances, if you have to roll because of stones and the plants are up already, and let's say you're coming in at initially 170,000 plants, with a few damaged ones in there, you're still in that magic range, and that which will be fine. If the plants are broken and there's too many broken, then it's not warm enough that day because sometimes 25 degrees is 25 degrees, but you need those plants to be very pliable. So those are some of the things to kind of keep in mind for that. So that's what I had about that. I think at the end, I'm just going to backtrack a slide here and just to kind of finish off, just to remind everybody, right now with the dry soil conditions, I would probably hold off on rolling fields, especially with the soil moving around. I would wait until after the plants have emerged. That way, you have a little bit more control in when you roll. Between first trifoliate and unifoliate, and then first trifoliate and second trifoliate, you got about 10 days roughly between each stage. So you do have, let's say, a 20-day window that you can, if it's not working one day, come back a different day. The warmer the day, the better it is. So if you get another one of those 30-degree days, and that's the days you won't see any damage to those plants. With that being said, that's what I had to talk about here today. But I think Lionel had a couple questions for me as well.
You bet, Dennis. And before I get into the one from last week, just a question regarding if we do get rain, how long should you wait after the rain before you start rolling so you don't make it too hard of a surface, or will you make it too hard of a surface?
Well, I think sometimes in some instances, I've seen fields that have been rolled and then you get a pounding rain on it afterwards. There, you're going to definitely get some crusting happening. I've seen this happen in years gone by. If it's a nice gentle rain, you probably won't you'll have very little crusting. As far as how long to wait, enough time for that soil to be dry on top. The main reason for that is you don't want to be rolling up any mud on the rollers. The roller should be clean. Otherwise, you'll pull up more plants. So just enough so that top layer is kind of dry enough to kind of go across the field and not pulling up any mud, and then you should be good. Now, the other question that does come up from time to time is, if the plants have germinated, and can I still roll? If they're in the soil and in that, inch and a quarter range and they've just germinated, I still feel that you can still roll yet at that stage if you wish. If you're starting to poke through, though, if you have any poking through, then I would hold off and wait until those beans have emerged at that unifoliate to trifoliate stage. You still there, Lionel?
Yes, sorry, Dennis, my mouse was giving me
Yeah.
a little bit of a problem there. Anyways, so Dennis, regarding the if we do get a heavy rain and it does crust, rolling will actually help then to break that crust.
Not really. Rolling won't necessarily break up that crust. Um, like if let's say you haven't rolled, chances of you having a crust on it afterwards doesn't. It's not as critical, or we won't see it if you don't roll before the rain. If you roll Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that again. So if you're rolling before the rain and you get a hard pounding rain on it, then you tend to get a bit more crusting happening. If you don't roll and it rains, then I would roll afterwards, and you shouldn't have any crusting problems if you don't roll. Because a lot of times, even with the packer wheels, you'll get a little bit of a crust, but those soybeans do push through pretty good. They're not like canola that has a real struggle with it. If the field's really crusted bad and you're concerned, then that's another topic we can talk about and try to break up that crust. But for the most part, they will come through with a little crust on top. They will push through okay, but if it's too hard, they won't push through very easily, especially if they're seeded a little on the deeper side.
Okay, and if temperatures stay cool and we can't get it rolled without breaking, how big can the plants be and still rolled?
Well, as I said, if you got that 20-day window, first, so if you're looking at, from unifoliate to trifoliate stage, there's at least 10 days there, and another 10 days on top of that before you hit second trifoliate stage. If it's a really good warm day, rolling at second trifoliate stage would be okay, but it has to be a warm day. I've seen fields that have been rolled later than that, but it has to be really hot. But ideally, try to be in there in that unifoliate to first trifoliate stage, and just watch the weather a little bit. Usually, we get enough hot weather in there that it doesn't take long to roll a field.
Okay, and then one of the questions from last week that we missed was it was regarding inoculant, and one of the comments I guess you made was that liquid inoculant would. Can you explain more on the effects of rain or no rain on liquid inoculant?
Well, with liquid inoculant, sometimes because it's applied directly to the seed, what can happen on years with excessive rainfall, kind of at and around seeding time, and you can sometimes see the inoculant wash away a little bit off the seed. That's why we kind of recommend for growers that have very little history of soybeans that they both use two forms of inoculant. They use the liquid on seed, and they use a granular formulation as well, because that granular formulation is available a little bit later. But this year, I'm not as concerned with that. We don't have that excessive rainfall that we've had in some years after seeding, right? It's been fairly dry right now. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. If you have a good field history of soybeans, liquid inoculant has seen to be works well on its own, because of the history that's there. But if there's no history, then you have to lean a little bit on the granular inoculant as well as the liquid.
Okay, well, those are the questions I have for you right now, Dennis. So thanks for coming on today and giving us a little bit of information on managing our soybeans when they're coming up. So great, thanks for
Okay,
being on.
thank you. I'll let you take control there, Lionel.
You bet. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it right over to Sonia now. So, if Sonia, if you want to grab the screen, we'll talk a little bit about some of our oilseed crops and how we can manage them during some of the drier conditions.
Okay, thanks, Lionel. Thanks so much. So just might hear a bit of background today. Sorry about that, out of office. But yeah, we're going to talk about seeding oil seeds here into some of the drier conditions that we are seeing. So first, I just wanted to give a little bit of an idea for soil temperature. We're definitely, this is in the central region, and you can take a look for each region, but sitting at quite high in terms of soil temperature in the top 2 inches, and canola being optimal for seeding at that 8 to 10, we are definitely above that, and for all our crops. Also, just from May 11th, this was the soil moisture we were looking at in the top 0 to 30 centimeters. And of course, really sitting in that optimal, but also moving towards dry, as we've just seen really high temperatures and high winds as well. So when we take a look at canola seeding, right, you're probably seeding between half an inch to in 1.25 inches, potentially deepest. But we are, yeah, definitely have been seeing a lot of drier conditions in that top 2 inches, like I mentioned, with the warmer temperatures and winds. So because it's such a small seed, having some moisture there, though, is really optimal for canola, especially in that top inch, because I'm showing here, right, soil crusting, for example, having just a bit of moisture for it to be able to pop through is really key. So a couple of things: that rough stubble, soil crusting, also high weed pressure. Those are all issues that we can see. When we're looking at the drier conditions in that top 2 inches, you have a couple of options. If you check the moisture at about 1.25 or 1.5 inches, and there is some, could definitely choose to seed canola a bit deeper. If there doesn't look like there's rain coming up in the forecast, but this is a riskier choice just because it is deeper, so it is going to affect the canola emergence, and then also potentially, if it's emerging poorly, also lead to a thinner stand and potentially more flea beetle damage per plant. If there is some rainfall looking in the forecast, and you know that that top 2 inches is dry, so you don't have the option to seed into any moisture at this point, to seed a bit shallower if there is that rainfall coming up. So about, 0.75 to 1 inch. I would personally shy away from 0.5 inches just because of the high winds that we're experiencing as well, and just the soil movement. So really that 0.75 to an inch, and then really focus on making sure that that depth is consistent, and that you're also getting good packing on the seed row, so that you are conserving potentially any moisture that comes in. You're conserving that the seeds are staying there, and you're protecting, like I mentioned, against those high winds. So really important to check that seed depth after a pass or two. Make sure it is consistent, and if you have to, I don't know, potentially decrease the speed of seeding to make sure it stays consistent. Yeah, those are some things as well. And the packer wheel pressure, that it's really, packing that row so that that seed has good soil contact, but also is firmly in the seed bed against the high winds that we've been seeing. So we also have other conditions here that can potentially harm canola emergence. So I mentioned the tall, or it being really tough stubble for it to come out, and hopefully earlier, if you chose to till when there was more um, moisture, that was an option. So then you could plant shallower into the drier soil with a good pack. If there's rain forecast, the seeds are going into a dry soil, right? So as much as possible, focusing on that timing. So soil crusting as well. In really high clay soils, I guess potentially just a light tillage, but again, we're really focusing on that moisture. So just knowing that that would take away moisture if this is pre-seeding. But then also, a big thing this year with the warm temperatures that we've seen is just the rapid weed growth on fields. So really trying to deal with that, if possible, pre-plant, whether that's a burn off, other cultural weed control options, because those small weeds, even if they are small, right, are taking moisture away from those smaller seeded crops as well. So yeah, just like I mentioned, yeah, weed management. I'm sure Kim will touch on that a bit more here. Yeah, and we've seen quick growth this year, as well as a lot of volunteer canola, and just making sure you're really taking note of when your weeds are hitting those stages for weed management decisions. So it wouldn't be proper talk about seeding if I didn't mention also evaluating your stand after it comes up. So I think the easiest way, right, is once things have been seeded and we're looking at emergence in a couple of weeks here, taking that meter stick out and just counting down the number of seedlings that you see down that meter stick, and it's just a really quick little math. Seedlings down that meter stick times 100 divide by your row spacing in centimeters, and that'll give you your estimated number of plants per square meter, right, which we would want to be at 50 to 80, or you could divide that by 10 to get by square foot, where we want 5 to 8. And that really gives you an idea just in terms of if there is some flea beetle pressure coming up, different things like that, what the health of your stand is. So I'm going to switch real quickly here to flax, and then I'll touch on sunflowers briefly. But flax is definitely the crop that is most likely going to be have the most challenge emerging out of dry conditions. It is, it just has less, I guess, kind of root vigor in a sense. It doesn't go quite as deep as some of the other crops. So it really requires having a moist, firm, even seed bed as much as possible to really help support its emergence. So again, the soil depth here is about 1 to 1.5 inches. Again, checking that soil, if there is some moisture in that top 1.5 inch, to just go a bit deeper to that 1.5 inch, and then ensure that really good packing for seedbed and moisture, especially with the high winds that we're seeing, making sure that your flax is packed is good. And again, it's pretty similar to canola here in terms of it being a smaller oil seed, that we will see some emergence reduction with crusting, excessive weed competition, and herbicide injury. But yeah, moisture for flax out of the 3 oil seeds here is most key for sure. So sunflowers though, depth is of course about 1.5 inches to 2, and placing it into, if again, going a bit deeper to 2 inches if you still have that moisture there. I think the message is pretty similar, right? Packing the row, and then also that gives you good seed to soil contact. Now, the great thing is, of course, that if you are having drier conditions for longer periods here, the seed for sunflowers can sit safely before germinating, and it really has those deep roots that will be pulling out water and nutrients. So in terms of root structure, etc., to get those seedlings going, it is one of the best crops here. And just to make sure though, again, that you check that depth, just to make sure it's consistent for seeding and you're not really going further than that 2 inches. And then really quickly, again, this is to check your seed depth, but also to check your stand once plants start emerging in a couple of weeks, or maybe some early seeded fields in a week or two. But measure a row that is 1/1000th of a field with a tape measure. So you can see here, this is a great little table here, that if this is your row width, that would be the row length for 1/1000th of an acre. And then you're going to count all the plants along that row. So like put your tape measure down and then count through that, and do it about 2 to 4 times. And that would give you an idea of the stand that you have that's emerged there. So with that, I'll send it back to Lionel, and for any questions.
Okay, Sonia, one question was for sunflowers, how tolerant are they to spring frost?
Yeah, so we have some good tolerance to spring frost, for sure in the early stages here. So I wouldn't be too concerned about fields that are popping up, just coming up soon.
Okay, good. Well, that's good news with the forecast. So from that, thanks, Sonia. And if you hang on just in case there's a couple of questions coming in as well. And I'm going to go into the panel now. And first question would be for John Gavlosky. John, this question is regarding canola and seed treatments and what happens to the plant when it's planted into dry soil. There's the seed treatment. We always talk about you only got so many days, but if it's sitting in dry ground, does that seed treatment start breaking down right away, or does it need some moisture to break down?
Yeah, good question. So with the seed treatments, they're quite water soluble, and if there's enough moisture to germinate the seed, then the seed treatment is starting to be activated and to break down. If it's completely dry conditions and things aren't even germinating, um, you're not going to get breakdown at that if it's extremely dry. But again, if there's even enough moisture to get the seeds to germinate, then the clock starts ticking. And there's been good research looking at the effects of both moisture and temperature on the seed treatments. And years where we get a lot of moisture, we've got some heavy rains potentially coming up in some parts of the province later in the week. Years when we get a lot of moisture, you get less or fewer days of protection. The seed treatment is being activated. Some will, again, very water soluble, so it can be diluted out as well. So excessive rain, you'll get fewer days of protection. But again, back to the question, very dry conditions is the exact opposite. Then the seed treatment isn't being activated.
Okay, and another question, I got this one yesterday, and I didn't have a chance to make up the slide, but do grasshopper eggs need to be in the soil to hatch, or can they be on soil surface or on top of the ground?
They certainly can hatch uh, on the surface or out of the soil. In lab situations, we've hatched them out before out of soil. So yeah, short answer is they can hatch out of the soil.
Okay, so they don't need really any protection then or nothing.
So it's certainly to get through the winter, it's helpful for them to be in soil and to have some cover over them. But if you're working the fields up in the spring and you surface some grasshopper eggs and the predators don't find them, then they certainly could hatch. They're certainly more vulnerable when they're not in the soil. There's a lot of predators that are very good at locating them, and it just makes it much easier.
Good. Thanks, John. Marla, question for you. I had a guy broadcasting fertilizer yesterday, and his goal was hoping that it was going to rain, but he was broadcasting and it wasn't coded. We had a 30 plus degree day yesterday with wind. How fast does volatilization occur? And I guess what he was wondering is how much could he lose in a day if nothing fell?
That's a good question. It's going to depend a little bit on essentially the low humidity, but also the soil moisture conditions right at the surface where it was broadcasted. So in some cases, as we saw just recently in what we've been setting up in our demonstrations for crop diagnostic school, those granules have been sitting on the soil surface now for quite a few days without really any dissolving of them because they went onto very dry soil on the surface. And so if that soil surface is really dry, then we end up seeing maybe very little of that kind of dissolving into the soil. And without that dissolving, we don't really have a high risk of loss because if it's urea and it hasn't actually moved into the soil and been kind of acted upon by the urease enzyme, it's not starting to transform into ammonia for that or ammonium for that volatilization potential. If it's broadcast onto damp soil, even if we get a very light rain right now, which we may see a little bit in that future, kind of those little scattered showers and very little rain, that's when that potential for the volatilization starts to increase because now that urea granule has dissolved, but it's still sitting on the surface and didn't get enough moisture in order to move that down into the soil. So in those cases, the dry soil very dry at the surface may be very beneficial. But if we are seeing situations where we get that little scattering of rain and not enough to actually move it in, that's when that risk is going to increase again.
Okay, so then not as risky yesterday putting it on, but maybe more of a risk today where if we do get a couple tenths of an inch of rain, but not a whole
Yeah.
bunch.
Yeah, that's where some of that risk can go up. And if it stays windy, even if we don't have the kind of hotter conditions later on, but with that wind, we still may see some loss. Now that we're getting a bit cooler, that loss potential could go down a little bit just because we don't have those same kind of hot winds, but high winds are still going to be a problem. One of the other concerns I may have is just on the variability of that application. If it's being broadcasted on in big winds because it's not necessarily landing exactly where you want it to. And we've been seeing a little bit of that too, where there's just been kind of a wide variability of where those granules land in the wind. But just things to think about. But not a big deal until that little bit of rain starts falling.
Okay, good. Yeah. We had talked a bit about the wind yesterday, and I guess when you're getting a custom applied, sometimes you don't have all the options in the world either. So
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something we can't always control. If it's possible to put that protection on it when broadcasting, again, that broadcasting or that protection of that product is really meant to be a bit of an insurance policy. And so when we don't know how we can kind of control those conditions, or we can't guarantee that we're going to get that, almost a half inch of rain right after to move that urea down into the soil, then having that protection on is very helpful as, again, that bit of an insurance.
yeah, thanks, Marla. Okay, Kim, I think I ask you this question every year, and it's something that I'm starting to get from more and more producers, and controlling horsetail. This producer sprayed it with glyphosate and heat, and basically nothing happened. What's the trick in your mind to slowing it down? I know we had talked before a while ago, and you had said it seems to be like in wet areas, but they're finding it on hilltops now. They were saying, and I don't know. You make your comments, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Lionel. Yeah, this question comes up every year. We do see a lot of horsetail like along old rail beds and railways and stuff. And there's a lot of it gets sprayed kind of in non-crop areas, but it does encroach in crops sometimes. And normally it is in a wetter area. So this is a perennial creeping, like it's a creeping perennial that it has a massive underground root system. There's multiple horizontal layers of roots in this weed. And those roots can go down as deep as 20 feet. So this is not something that you can get rid of easily because it does have a massive, massive root system. Like it's something like a quackgrass or a Canada thistle, but a way, way bigger root system. So, and the reason it's there's got to be water somewhere. So even on a hilltop, there's got to be a water source that it's accessing in order to get there. Like even though we tend to think of hilltops as dry or sandy soil or lighter soils or that type of thing because of erosion, but there's got to be water underground somewheres that we're just don't know where that is. And then when it shows up on the edges of fields, it's usually like on next to the bush or kind of coming off a ditch where the water tables are just a little higher. And so we don't tend to lose a lot of acres to it. But where it does grow, it grows so densely that there just is no crop in there. So, you're wasting all of your inputs trying to get anything to grow where the horsetail or scouring rush. It's really both. They're very, very similar plants. I just call it all horsetail. I wouldn't worry about which one it actually is because they behave the same. Anyways, but yeah, so it's you just don't, it's so competitive. It grows so thickly that you just don't get any crop growing where these patches are. And really, it's a really hard one to kill. Glyphosate is not going to do hardly anything to it. It's just the best product is actually MCPA. And if you look in our guide to crop protection, in the current guide at the front of the guide in the special weed problems pages, it talks about using MCPA. Going after it with just straight MCPA, you're looking at a really high rate, like a 10-ounce rate, and that's really the best product to use out there. It's not really a broadleaf or a grassy weed. It's kind of in a separate category all by itself. And it just has very, very, very little leaf area material to take up any product. And so you're really just trying to get stem absorption with whatever you're spraying. So MCPA is honestly the best product you can use. And basically, so use as much of that as you can. If you're going after it in crop and something like a wheat crop, I also have heard that Arylex, which is a product, that's a group 4 product, or that's haloxifin. That's in a lot of the Corteva products. Those are great products to be using for something like this. And I would try anything with haloxifin and then heat that up with a little bit of MCPA. So something like a Pixero or any number of their products that you could use in a cereal crop with some added MCPA would do the best job of knocking it back. But it's a really tough one to get. And honestly, going after it with your regular pre-burns, you're not going to get any activity. You'll get it black, like it might blacken it up a little bit, but then it doesn't really do anything. That glyphosate just does not get into that root system, and it's not going to do very much. I would discourage tillage because that does move the roots around, especially the ones that are closer to the surface. But there are a lot of deeper roots as well. Again, it has multiple layers of horizontal roots down below. So tillage will move around some of the top roots and maybe spread it a bit that way. So try to discourage that if you can. And again, at the end of the day, you're just looking at patch management of this weed.
Okay, and a comment just came in is see it often in low calcium areas like sand ridges that are never over wet. Liming has helped.
Okay, yeah, that I haven't seen anything on that. I'm not sure. I know when many years ago when I did my master's degree in Brandon, we had a sandy site for one of my sites, and it was a very sandy soil, and it was actually absolutely full of horsetail, but it had a really high water table. So even some of these lighter soils, they do have the high water table. So I'm not sure if it's as much as much of a soil type thing as the fact that there's got to be a water table close by, because those roots need to access a lot of water.
Yeah, and I was just going to comment there that I know in that Lauder area, kind of south of Hartney, I was in a couple fields that it was fairly bad in, and but there may not be a lot of surface water, but with the water table is fairly high, so that would maybe, and it's a sandy soil as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And in non-crop areas, actually like using the old chlorsulfuron. We used to use it as glean in crop, but now it's actually called Teller, and it does not have a cropping use at all. And we have to be really careful with that one because of the long residual. Chlorsulfuron is one of the longest residual group 2s that we have, the sulfonylureas. But it does a really good job in non-crop areas. So if you do have it someplace where you could use an industrial product, that is a very good product to be using on that. But again, that's not registered for any in-crop use, and the rate that you need to use to go after horsetail is pretty high. So it's not something you can use in crop because of the long residual. For sensitive crops in the rotation, it would affect them very, very badly.
And another comment just came, no water table there. The lower wet areas of the field have none in it, just on the high and dry sand that tests low calcium and low acid.
Yeah. Yeah, the calcium, I don't know. But I haven't seen anything on that. I really only seen stuff on the the herbicide end of things, so that there might be something to that. I can take a look and see if I can find anything on that, if I can find a correlation with that. But off the top of my head, I haven't heard that.
We'll do some checking, and hopefully we can have maybe a bit of an answer for next week. So
sure. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, Kim, while you're still here, we have a couple weed ID days coming up.
Yes, so Carmen, we now have resurrected the Carmen Weed Seedling ID Day. I think this was running for about 45 years, I think. And then, of course, it stopped because of COVID, but we've resurrected it again. And so it's the third Wednesday in May, which this year is Wednesday, May 21st. It's at the U of M farm from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. There's no pre-registration required. Just show up. And basically we'll have a bit of a presentation and then a whole bunch of weeds that I'm, starting to dig up now and get in little pots and stuff. And so if anybody has anything weird and wonderful they'd like me to have at Weed ID Day, shoot me a message because I'd love to have lots of weird stuff there. So it's a good idea. We try to have really small weeds and then maybe some slightly larger ones as well. But the idea is to have them so that you can identify, as we start getting into spray season, the crops are we talked about, we're still not even seeded all across the province yet, but the crops will be coming up soon, and we are in crop. By the time we get to our in-crop spraying, we need to know what weeds we're going after. So there's that one, and you have yes, the next one is ACC. So I also am very fortunate to be able to go to ACC every year. They have a weed seedling identification day, and so again, we're doing a presentation and then a little bit of demonstration as well with some of the weeds. They have a weed garden there as well, and it's a permanent garden, and they have students that look after that weed garden. So they have started a bunch of weeds from seed. So they will have some very small weeds as well as they'll have some more permanently, some of the biennials and perennials as well. They have some of those going year round. And so that is at the ACC campus on May 22nd. So that's the next day. It is 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. It starts at 9:30 sharp. So if you come a little bit early for registration, and if you need a hand, if you need a map to let you know how to get to which building it is on campus and where to park, I can let you know. Just shoot me a text or a message, and I can send you a map on how to get there. And but yeah, if you want to confirm the attendance, there's a website down there, or not a website, sorry, there's an email down there that you can contact and let them know, and they can also send you a map as to how to get to that building. But it's the same place. We've been going there for the last number of years, so same as the last couple of years.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. I mentioned this last week. We're in the process of lining up fields for our summer pest and disease surveys. And so if you're interested, or your farm is interested in being part of these surveys, there's a link to the it's a quick questionnaire, just giving us some information that you're interested, and then somebody will contact you as regarding some of the surveys and the disease or pest surveys we're doing. So if you're interested, send us fill out the form, and somebody will get in contact with you. We need quite a few fields to keep on top of what's going on. So if you could do that, or if you're working with a producer that you think it would be good for him to be part of the surveys, you could also see if he wants to be enrolled as well. There is our crop production extension specialists, our contact informations and locations. So if you've got any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. Our livestock specialists, and forage specialists. So if you have any questions, we're getting eager to get those cows out to pasture. So if you have any questions about getting cattle ready for pasture, or even planning this year's feed for next year or next winter, give any one of these a call. They'll definitely give you a hand. Our MASC offices throughout the province, their locations and phone numbers there. The livestock price insurance program is June 12th is the latest date for signing up. You're signing into the program. So if you're interested in that program, definitely give them a call. Field crop protection guides are available at those offices as well. Or if you're needing more, just contact any one of the ag extension people. And my contact information, Lori's contact information, if you have any questions, or if you're interested, have any topics you'd like us to cover, definitely give us a shout, and we'll try to include them and get your questions answered. So thanks for attending, and join us on May the 21st, our next edition of Crop Talk, when we'll be talking about the the majority of our crop being planted, or a good rainfall and everybody had to get out of the field for a while. Thanks for attending.